We're back with another episode of Shh with We're in Conversation. This is episode number 7, and I'm here with Rehana. We want to touch on a topic that is pretty crucial in life, and that is making connections with people. We've had a lot of events this week happen at the Barefoot Space, and I would like Rihanna to just walk us through some of what happened.
Adil, it's been a beautiful week of connecting. Of course, Barefoot Space is a space for reflecting, connecting, communicating, and creating. And I think this week has been a week of connecting and creating. We are, of course, today on National Women's Day in South Africa, a day in which we remember the over 20,000 women that were mobilized 70 years ago with their deep courage to make a stand around the fact that they would not carry the hated Dompas or passbook. And women took on the might of the apartheid regime. And so this week we have had guests at the space. It's been 1 year. I think it's important to say that it's 1 year since Barefoot Space opened. And Ashraf Garda from Champion South Africa, presenter of the National Pulse at SAFM, and a long-time friend, was back at Barefoot Space. So he'd been here last year when Barefoot Space opened. And to have Ashraf back and just our conversation around where the country is at, what it would take to champion the nation, and his ongoing support for the vision that is Barefoot Space was great. And I think a little bit in that connection around people who have an issue with the address of where Barefoot Space is based, and the notion that if this space was in another area of Johannesburg, it may have taken off differently. And I think that deep reminder of Barefoot Space is not just about the space, it is about what the space could mean to people in this geography, what it means to connect various areas around the space, and the change makers in that space. Then, of course, absolutely delighted on Thursday uh, that brother and Sheikh Mirza Yawar Beg, hailing originally from Hyderabad in India, who has been a global consultant and has come back to South Africa after many years, had managed to carve time out in his really busy schedule because he had spoken at the Minara Chamber of Commerce, at the Congress of Business and Economics, had been to Nelson Mandela Bay and done an event in Gqeberha, had taken the time out to visit Barefoot Space. It meant a lot, knowing that he was holding so much whilst he was here, but had still taken the time to come and see what Barefoot Space was about, to sign our visitors' book, and to wish us the best. Again, deep reflections about the state of where South Africa is at, and what it means to lead in this context. And then, of course, there was Gathering Women of Impact on Friday afternoon. The ability to celebrate 1 year of Barefoot Space with almost 30 women of impact, and knowing that each of those women who had arrived on Friday is making deep impact in their homes, in public life, in the lives of other people, for the environment, for the healthcare system, for urban planning, for wellness, and just this absolute amazingly beautiful conversation, sharing of food, and the ability for women to celebrate who it is that they are and what it is that they bring to our nation.
So, you mentioned something very important, turning this country around. And as we know, this week in Joburg, there's a crisis around the dumping that is happening because Pick It Up on strike. I want to touch more on How do we elevate these people who do the garbage collection? Because as we can see, their work is critically important in society.
Adil, I think we've had this conversation, you and I, and even with your sister Fahima many times before. Um, there's a horrible tendency when you're at school, and if an educator feels like you're not doing that well in the classroom, to say, oh, do you want to become a garbage collector? As if that work that others do is somehow demeaning and horrible. Both garbage collectors and waste reclaimers who frequent our city, who we know, um, we all see around the city of Johannesburg, are doing the most meaningful work for society. And literally this week, we have seen that when those who come week in and week out and do our refuse round collections of waste that we generate unthinkingly and make sure that that waste reaches landfill, when they don't do that work, when waste reclaimers who come and sort through mine and your garbage bins to retrieve something of value that can be recycled and repurposed, when they don't do their work, we literally are drowning in our own waste. Johannesburg does, in fact, have a landfill crisis. There is very little time left before we run out of landfill space for where this waste ends up. And I think the worth of the work that people do, and I'm reminded often of Dr. Martin Luther King and that saying about even if your work is sweeping streets, do it with such passion, do it with such excellence that the day you're no longer there, people will recognize the way in which you did the task of street sweeping. And if we all brought that level of excellence, or as Ashraf would say, champion thinking and champion doing to what we do, South Africa has no shortage of beautiful human beings, many of whom give their best irrespective of what they're doing. But if every one of us took that attitude of excellence, whether we're picking up garbage, whether we're preparing a meal, whether we're convening groups in conversation, this country would be in a very different place.
So you mentioned champions, and I think my champions for this week are the garbage collectors. I want to know how, as a society at large, we celebrate these people who do this important work.
So, Adil, I think waste collectors, waste pickers are among categories of human beings whose work is undervalued. And they're not the only ones. So I really think it's time to begin to rethink the way in which we value. Of course, when we say shh, we're in conversation, that shh stands for soul, heart, head, and hands. We unfortunately live in a society where the work of the head is overvalued and the work of the hands is undervalued. The work of the heart is often not seen. And we forget that in fact we are not the work we do. We are indeed all souls on a human journey. And so I think it is about how we reframe which work is valuable in society and giving the work of the hands, whether that is picking up garbage, giving the work of driving and transport in our cities, those who drive buses and taxis, whether it's giving the work of those who care for the elderly or children, the value it deserves.
Thank you, Rihanna. I think once society understands that, we'll live in a much better place. I really appreciate your input this week, and we look forward to having you on another conversation, uh, checking out for this week. Thank you so much.